The Giants and Eagles are both coming off disappointing Week 5 losses. Which team will rebound? We're talking about that and a whole lot more on Crossover Thursday, Eagles Giants edition.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome on in to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles. My name is Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants. He is Louis DiBiase, host of Locked On Eagles. So glad that you can join us on this Crossover Thursday, which is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use our promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And on today's show, we're breaking down the New York Giants and Philadelphia Eagles. They clash on Thursday night at MetLife Stadium. The Eagles have kind of owned the Giants the last several years. The Giants going 1-7 in the last 8 meetings. And we're going to talk about the key storylines. We're going to look at matchups and the keys to victory. Louis, great to see you, my friend.
Yeah, you too. Thursday night battle between two NFC East rivals is always fun. I didn't realize, though, that the Eagles have, I feel like they've always had the Giants number over the years, but 1-7. I didn't know that record. That's pretty good for the Eagles fans. I'm sure they'll like that one.
And that one win obviously has come at MetLife Stadium.
Right.
Other than that, the Eagles, like I said, have owned the Giants. But anyway, Louis, let's get into the storylines. Both teams are coming off very disappointing losses. The Giants maybe a little more so than the Eagles, but the Eagles no longer undefeated. What are we looking at with the Eagles coming into Thursday night?
Yeah, they're trying to figure out why this offense is so Jekyll and Hyde. It feels like in the first half of games, or at least in one half of a football game, they look like their 2024 self that won a Super Bowl. And then they just can't move the ball in the other half. And it really feels like the last 2 weeks it's been defenses are adjusting in the second half to what you did well in the first half. And new play caller and offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo just doesn't really have a counter. You look at the Rams game, they had -1 passing yards in the first half. They didn't complete a single pass against Tampa Bay in the second half. And then against Denver, they blow a 17-3 lead. So they're trying to find their identity.
Right. And, you mentioned Saquon Barkley, old friend Saquon Barkley. Last week, didn't really get a whole lot of touches, and he's not really, averaging what he did the first year. I think Barkley is averaging something like 3.2 yards per carry. He had a run of 17 yards versus Denver, which was his long. And he's averaging 1.9 yards before contact. How much of that is the offensive line versus the play calling, do you feel?
Yeah, I think the play calling is more of an issue in the passing game. I think when it comes to the run game, the problem right now is the offensive line is just simply put not healthy on the interior. Their star left guard, Landon Dickerson, suffered an injury in the NFC Championship last year that I think he's still recovering from. Then he got hurt again in an open practice before the season started, got an ankle injury this past game against Denver. So he's just been battling through multiple injuries at the left side of the offensive line. And then at center, Cam Jurgens is coming off back surgery. He got banged up in the playoff run too, and he doesn't look 100% either. And then, of course, you have Tyler Steen, who's a first-time starter at right guard, who's good, but he's not who Mekhi Becton was last year. So I think the big problem with the run game right now is just the interior of the offensive line is either a new starter or very injured right now. So I think that's the problem because all of the talent is still there. And Saquon Barkley, when you look at him in a vacuum, it doesn't look like he's really dropped off. He looks just as physically gifted as last year. So I think it's more so a product of the offensive line's health, whereas the passing game, I think the problem is play calling.
All right, and before we segue into the Giants, because this question is actually going to lead into the Giants, there's been some, I guess, discord or unhappiness amongst the receivers with the Eagles. What's going on there?
Yeah, A.J. Brown has just not been happy with the inconsistencies of the passing game, and this has kind of been a problem over the last 3 years where I think his message was totally understandable. I think he had every right to want the ball more early on this season, but I think the problem that people continue to have with Brown over the last couple of years is the way he communicates that message. A cryptic post on social media a couple of weeks ago made everybody think maybe he wants out of Philadelphia. But the good thing is Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, they met privately for multiple hours the other night, so hopefully it's all kumbaya and they're making this thing work. But yeah, it's just, I think it's been just kind of a buildup over the last couple of years of inconsistent passing. And I think it's also a differing of philosophies. I think AJ wants them to be who they were in 2022, which was a team that won because of him in the passing game. And because they had so much success running the football last year and playing a safe brand of football, Jalen and the coaching staff has almost gone the other way. So I think that's maybe the problem too, is just a differing of philosophies on offense. But I think these two are the ultimate professionals, and it's not going to be a Donovan McNabb, Terrell Owens kind of situation where they let this tear the football team down. I don't think that's something you have to worry about.
All right. Now, from the Giants' perspective, I mentioned, the receivers. Obviously, the key storyline here is the Giants' receivers. They don't really have any. Having lost Malik Neighbors, obviously, after that in that week 4 loss, the week 4 win against the Chargers. Last week, the receivers not very good without Malik Neighbors. The Giants leaning more on the tight ends, and to add insult to injury, Darius Slayton, who had been wide receiver 2, but kind of now is the pseudo wide receiver 1 with Malik Neighbors out, will probably not play in this game. He is dealing with a very bad hamstring injury, was limping around the locker room. You couldn't miss it. Short turnaround, doesn't look good for him. So here's the bottom line with the Giants receivers, all right? They have Wan'Dale Robinson, Bo Collins, Jalen Hyatt. The 3 of those guys combined for 37 yards on 6 catches out of 13 pass targets, 6.16 average in that game against the Saints. Not very good, Lou. And, head coach Brian Dable said, well, we also have the tight ends and the running backs. So the Giants tight ends, a little bit more effective. They scored the 2 touchdowns. Theo Johnson did in the loss to the Saints. Now the Eagles defense, they are allowing 7.42 yards against tight ends, which is the 4th lowest average in the NFL. So, and no receiving touchdowns. And this is against teams like, tight ends like Travis Kelce, obviously the Denver tight ends, Evan Ingram and company. So the Eagles defense has done a pretty good job against opposing tight ends. And if that's how the Giants are going to lean in the passing game going forward, they're going to be up. It looks like they're going to be up for a big battle there against the Eagles defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jaxson Dart, too, like in his 3rd start, it is tough what he has to deal with right now. It's just unlucky and unfortunate that all these receivers are getting hurt in New York. But Brian Dable, like over the years, has been proven to be a pretty good play caller, and we'll see if he can help make things easier on Jaxson Dart and scheme players open, because I think that's what Philadelphia does not do well, is scheme players open. They're very reliant on their personnel, whereas in New York, like they don't have that luxury. So there's a lot of pressure on Dable, who's coaching for his career right now, coaching for his job, and with a rookie quarterback, he's really got to pull out his A game, especially against like you said, a really good Philadelphia Eagles defense that's been carrying this football team through the first 5 games of the season. It's why the Eagles are 4-1.
Right, and the Giants, just to address the likelihood that Darius Slayton will not be available, will probably elevate little Jordan Humphrey from their practice squad. Little Jordan Humphrey is not somebody, who this won't be his first rodeo. He's played in 7 seasons. He's a tall receiver, so he's got some speed on the outside. So that's probably what the Giants are going to do if indeed Slayton doesn't play. All right. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the specific matchups that can make or break this week's game. Giants, Eagles, it's crossover Thursday. We'll be right back. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, welcome back. You got Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles. I'm Patricia Trainer of Locked On Giants. He is Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles. The Giants and Eagles clash Thursday night football. They'll be the only game in town Thursday night at MetLife Stadium, aka the Meadowlands, where the Eagles have had a couple of miracles in their time against the Giants. So let's talk about the matchups. What do you see as being the make or break matchups for the Eagles in this game?
Yeah, for me, it's that really elite Giants front seven, their front four pass rush, especially against a banged up Eagles offensive line. Because when you look at it, normally over the years, the way to attack Jalen Hurts has been to throw a lot of pressure packages at him, to blitz him, because the Eagles really struggled with finding hot reads. Jalen would always try to pull a rabbit out of a hat and use his mobility to escape and not really process that there's going to be an open receiver. Lately, since Super Bowl 59, it feels like he has figured out the blitz. So teams now are dropping 7+ guys back into the second and third level of the defense and playing a lot of zone coverage, rushing 3 to 4 players. And Jalen Hurts this year has the third lowest success rate against a defense that is rushing 3 to 4 players against him. So the Giants really, when you look at their defensive line, with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence, they really don't need to blitz the Philadelphia Eagles, especially with how banged up the Eagles are on the interior. They have to make sure that they win that battle and make the Giants start to pressure them in other ways, because the Eagles, their bugaboo this year on offense has been not even just play calling, but Jalen Hurts in the second half of games is very hesitant to throw in tight windows and zone coverage. I think a lot of that stems from last year, how not turning the ball over really helped the Eagles win a championship, but it was because the Eagles' run game carried them. And this year, the run game, they don't have that luxury. So Jalen needs to play a more aggressive brand of football, and defenses are daring him to do that by dropping guys back. So they need to win that 4-man pass rush, and he's got to be willing to throw in tight windows against zone coverage.
Louis, great minds think alike, because that is my key matchup. And I'll just add to that. The Giants last week against the Saints managed to pressure Spencer Rattler 54.8% of the time, only one hit, 0 sacks. All right. Wild, right? I mean, you would think if you're pressuring the guy on more than half of his dropbacks, you would think you'd at least have a little bit more than that. But the problem with the Giants defense has been the back end and specifically the lack of creativity back there. Now, Spencer Rattler, a young quarterback, so you would have thought, okay, why not throw some disguises his way, get him to hold that ball an extra second or two and get him to, make a mistake. Well, the Giants didn't do that for whatever the reason. Now, with Jalen Hurts, a little bit more experience. The Eagles, according to Pro Football Focus and True Media, 72 pressures allowed this season. Teams have blitzed them 49.3% of the time, which is most in the NFL. And Philly has allowed 15 sacks, which I believe is tied for 9th most in the NFL at this point. So that pass rush, the Giants got a great defensive front, as you said. They got to get home with that pass rush and do a much better job than they did against the Saints. Yeah. Now, again, the back end of the defense, I'm just going to add that as a an extra here. The Giants' back end of the defense has been terrible. Too grabby, just mistakes, poor angles. I mean, Tyler Nubin, the safety, second-year safety, has just not looked good. He's regressed badly. He was on the coverage end of that big touchdown pass that the Saints had last week. Deonte Banks, who comes in on third down. I mean, anytime you see Deonte Banks coming in, you can set your watch. It's going to be man coverage, which I still don't get that rotation that they're doing. I think Cordell Flott has played a little bit better in that cornerback 2 spot opposite of Paulson Adebo. And then, the slot cornerback, even Drew Phillips, who was so good last year, seems to have taken a step back. He leads the league, I believe, in penalties as well as, I think, pass breakups, which is kind of a double-edged sword. But really, for me, in addition to that pass rush, we got to include the back end of the Giants, because that's where the problems have come. And against that Eagle wide receiver trio, that has me concerned.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think the Eagles defense is kind of a similar matchup to watch. Their pass rush this year, I feel like, has been pretty consistent at getting pressure. But the problem has been kind of like you mentioned. I mean, that's an insane stat that the Giants pressured Rattler last week. Like more than half the time, it didn't get him down to the ground. The Eagles have had an issue with that as well, finishing plays, creating sacks off of pressure. And with Jaxson Dart, when you look at his mobility, his ability to extend plays outside of structure using his legs, especially with how banged up the Giants' weapon group is right now on offense, he's going to need to do that to produce. So the Eagles, they've been able to get to these mobile quarterbacks like Bo Nix last week, even Baker Mayfield the week before. Jaxson Dart is another level of athlete, I think, even compared to those two. They need to create pressure, get to him, but get him on the ground, because if not, that's how the Giants, I think, will be able to produce on offense. That's I think, how they're going to have to produce in this football game. So finishing on the defensive line, I think, is really crucial for both sides.
Absolutely. And, I'll throw in one more potential matchup here.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants lately have been a get-right team for opponents that have struggled.
Yeah.
Why do I have this sick feeling that Saquon Barkley is going to get right against the Giants' run defense, which, quite honestly, it was better last week, but it's still not a top 15 unit like we thought it might be, especially given all the investment that the team made this offseason in that unit.
Yeah, I do feel like Saquon still has it. Historically, when you look at the history of the NFL, when a running back has a historic usage rate, like he did in 2024. You look at, Sean Alexander after 2005. You look at DeMarco Murray with the Cowboys after 2014. Terrell Davis in the 90s. Adrian Peterson after 2012. Like normally, historically, the following season, that running back does take a massive step back, whether it's just statistically or because of injuries. The guy just doesn't have it anymore from wear and tear, age, you name it, it happens. With Saquon, that's happening statistically right now, but when you look at him on the field, like that deep receiving touchdown he had last week on a wheel route, it doesn't look like he's lost a step. So I think it really is just a matter of when, not if, this Eagles run game will get back on track. And when I say when, I think it's going to be when this team just gets a little healthier up front. Maybe that will be the get-right game against the Giants on Thursday, but they need it because as talented as the Eagles are in the passing game, it's always been inconsistent with Jalen Hurts in the Nick Sirianni era. The run game is their bread and butter. I've said on the show, it's their superpower, and they can win games without it being elite. But if they want to win a championship, it's got to get back on track.
Louis, I know Saquon was listed on the injury report, I believe, with a knee. How bad is it, and how much do you think that has affected him?
Yeah, it looked like it did hold him back a little bit in the second half against the Denver Broncos. He was limited this week so far. We'll see what happens. I think he is going to play in this game. But again, we'll monitor it. They do have A.J. Dillon as well in the backfield, Will Shipley, Tank Bigsby. So they do have some, experience in the backfield behind Saquon. I think Barkley will still be the workhorse. This is not going to be a committee-like approach against New York. But because of that injury, maybe expect a few more touches for Shipley and Dillon specifically. Because I think a crucial part of this, Patricia, like I said, Saquon still has to be the face of that offense, but they need him to be healthy down the stretch for the playoff run. So I think in games like this, you might see him held back a little bit because he is banged up.
And, you mentioned the Eagles' pass rush against the Giants' offensive line. The offensive line's been a little bit better, believe it or not, since the return of Andrew Thomas at left tackle. And the interior, surprisingly, has been a little bit better. The Giants not a sieve or humans turnstiles for pass rushers. In terms of that matchup, though, if you had to key in on one specific guy versus one specific Giant O-lineman, who are you picking?
Yeah, obviously Jalen Carter needs to be the one that takes over this game, but I'm looking at Jalix Hunt against the Giants' left side of the offensive line. Jalix, there's a lot of pressure on him in year 2. They expected him to break out with Josh Sweat leaving and Brandon Graham. Nolan Smith is on IR. He won't be back until November. He was supposed to be kind of your go-to, and I think he maybe isn't ready for that, but they really need him right now. They're getting some solid snaps from Zadarius Smith and Josh Uche, veterans, as those third and fourth rotating guys, but Jalix, they put a lot into him this year. They are banking on him, especially with Nolan Smith out, kind of carrying you in that way. So I'm really watching Hunt against that left side of the Giants offensive line. Can he generate pressure consistently on Thursday? Because he's the youngest, most talented player on the edge. And they're getting pressure from their defensive tackles. Like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Moro Ojoma have been great this year. They need more from their edge rushers, specifically Jalix. So I'm really watching Hunt on Thursday night.
All right. So coming up next, we're going to take a look at the keys to victory for each team. You got Locked On Giants Locked On Eagles Crossover Thursday. We'll be right back. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles, is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why you need to check out Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. See where your seats are, and the closer it gets to showtime, you stand to save even more. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles, is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, everybody, welcome back. Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles, Crossover Thursday. I'm Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants. He is Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles. And Lou, let's talk about the keys to victory for each team.
Yeah, I think for the Philadelphia Eagles, again, it's finding consistency on the offensive side of the ball. It's putting together finally a four-quarter performance. I know a lot of times on the show I'll say win the turnover battle for the Eagles, but I'm going to toss that out the window. I don't even care if they have a couple turnovers. I want them to win the explosive play battle on Thursday night. I think when they take sacks, they have the most three and outs in the NFL this year. That's not better than turning the football over. So, throwing a pick in your own zone is a problem, but sometimes being aggressive isn't a bad thing, even if it does result in an interception down the field. So I want the Eagles to win in the explosive play area this week. I think that's a key. Limiting the Giants' front four pass rush. I think that is like the strength of the Giants team that could steal this football game. And then for me, it's also just capitalizing in the red zone like they've been doing all year. They were perfect in the red zone heading into that game against Denver, and they still had a lot of success. So for me, it's win the explosive play battle. It's have your continued success in the red zone. And then to me, it's find a way to limit that Giants pass rush against a banged up Eagles offensive line.
All right, now I'm going to lean on two things for the Giants, starting with the red zone. The red zone offense, not very good for the Giants. I call it the dead zone, okay? The Giants, they get inside that red zone, and the biggest problem that I have seen from the Giants this year with the red zone is they call slow developing plays. The shotgun, sending a guy out wide, just they give the defense the advantage by giving them time to catch up to whatever it is they're doing. The Giants have to be faster and more efficient in the red zone. That has been a problem. They've squandered too many opportunities. They can move the ball fine between the 20s, but they can't keep squandering opportunities in the red zone. And then, I'm going to lean on this again. The Giants' run defense against Saquon Barkley and that Eagles rushing attack. The Giants have allowed 5.3 yards per rushing attempt, 29th in the NFL. They have allowed 700 rushing yards, which is 26th in the NFL. A little better last week against the Saints. First time they held an opponent to under 100 yards rushing. But you need to see that week in and week out. And, with Dexter Lawrence in there, Dexter Lawrence last week played, and he was kind of on a pitch count because he was sick. And this week he said he's feeling better, but he's still not 100%. So whatever it was he had really kind of rocked him a little bit. So the hope is that, he's 100% come Thursday night. But more importantly, they need guys up front and in the linebacking group to get off blocks, plug holes, and just stop the run. And they have not done a very good job of that.
Yeah, I think, and it's simply put at times, but winning in the trenches, I think, is so important, especially for teams like the Giants and Eagles that are dealing with things around their roster. I think when you can win that battle with the offensive and defensive line, that covers up so much, especially on a short week like this. I'm really going to be watching those battles specifically on both sides of the ball. I think that's going to be a key against New York and against Philadelphia from a Giants perspective. So, I mean, it sounds simple, but I think both these teams to just kind of get back on track might need to lean on their lines, and we'll see who gets the better of the other team in that way on Thursday night.
And certainly, this is low hanging fruit again, but the Giants are not good enough to overcome mistakes. And when they pile up, as they did against the Saints, we see what happens, how it can turn very ugly.
And see, the Eagles, I think they could afford to make some mistakes in this game by being a little overly aggressive on Thursday. I think, again, as I was saying earlier, a turnover here or there in a certain light might not be as bad if you're taking chances against, like you said, a struggling New York Giants secondary. Give A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, Dallas Goedert, your top four weapons. Jalen Hurts, like if it's not wide open, you can still, like those guys are still open. Like give them chances to make plays, and not just in the first half like he did against Denver, but I think in the second half he's been getting far too conservative to close games out. And with the run game not being consistent right now, to put teams away, you might need to be a little more aggressive throwing the football. So that's a big thing as well against New York.
All right, Lou, final thoughts. Who wins this game and how bad is it going to be?
Yeah, sorry to our Giants viewers and listeners. I do think the Eagles are going to get right in this game. They've had New York's number. The Giants are really banged up. I think Jaxson Dart's going to have to elevate a lot against a really good defense. And normally the Eagles, when they lose one game over the last few years, they don't lose multiple games. Outside of that 2023 collapse, since 2022, this Eagles team just doesn't lose back-to-back games. They actually, before the Denver loss, had won 20 of their last 21 games. So I think the Eagles get back on track. I think New York will be competitive in the first half, but I do think the Eagles run away with this one and finally put together a third and fourth quarter performance that we can hang our hat on. Maybe that's my heart talking here, but I'm feeling pretty confident.
I think you're right, Lou. I mean, I've said before, until the Giants give me really a consistent reason to believe,
Right.
I just can't say that I feel good about it. Then you throw in the problems in the secondary, the lack of receivers, quality receivers that they have. I need to see it.
Right.
Jaxson Dart is the only reason I think right now that fans are tuning in to see how he does. But other than that, it's just more of the same. And Giant fans are getting tired of it. And I don't blame them. They deserve better. But, hopefully it won't be too ugly on Thursday night. And who knows, that's why you play the game. Nobody thought the Giants were gonna beat the Chargers, and they did. So you never know.
And Thursday night football is weird, Patricia. Like you never know. With the NFL through September and October, it's a weird league. It's a weird sport at this time of the year. So even when I was talking that confident, I'm like, watch, this is going to be a one-score game in the fourth quarter. Who knows? That's just the NFL right now.
Exactly. All right, folks, that's going to do for this edition of Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Eagles. Again, we want to thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Crossover Thursday, or if you made us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. The NFL season is finally here, so for your next listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler, the Madman Rowland, gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Be sure to follow Louis DiBiase's work, Locked On Eagles, on Patricia Traynor, Locked On Giants. Be sure to check us out. We will have recaps of the Giants and Eagles game Thursday night on our Friday show. We hope you will join us. Until then, everybody have a great rest of your day.